The Merlin engine screams. 30,000 feet above the channel, the Spitfire shudders. 8 Messerschmitts close from above, tracers already reaching. The rookie pilot's hands grip the stick. His oxygen mask fogs. He has maybe 10 seconds before they're inside his guns. The altimeter needle is already pegged. He can't climb. He can't turn. He can only dive or die. His thumb finds a switch he's never touched in combat. One wrong move, and he augurs into the water below. One right move and 8 of his squadron mates survive the next 60 seconds. July 1943, north of the Isle of Wight. The summer of 1943 is a grinding mathematics of attrition. The channel is no longer a barrier, it's a grave. Every day, RAF fighters ferry across to escort American bombers over occupied France. Every day, Luftwaffe interceptors rise to meet them. The kills are counted. The losses are tallied. The numbers tell a story. British pilots are dying faster than they can be replaced. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Supermarine Spitfire is the finest single-engine fighter ever built. Graceful, responsive, deadly at altitude. The Merlin engine, supercharged, fuel-injected, pulls the fighter to 35,000 feet, where the air is thin and cold. At altitude, the Spitfire owns the sky. It turns tighter than a Messerschmitt. It climbs faster than an FW-190. But that advantage only exists if you get there first. The problem is simple and brutal. You can't climb what you can't see. Luftwaffe tactics have shifted. German pilots no longer meet the RAF head-on. They climb higher. They position themselves above the sun. They dive from altitude, fire a burst, and climb away. The Spitfire's weakness is not speed or maneuverability, it's rate of climb. At sea level, the Merlin can claw skyward at 4,000 feet per minute. At 20,000 feet, that drops to 2,000. At 30,000, barely 500. A German pilot diving from 35,000 has all the advantages of energy and position. A British pilot below has only desperation. The solution, command says, is formation flying. Stay tight. Watch for the bounce. If you see them coming, turn hard and let your squadron mates defend your 6. It's good advice. It also costs lives. Ground crews see the damage reports. Spitfires come back with cannon holes the size of teacups punched through the wings. Fuselages shot to pieces. Tail sections hanging by control cables. The pilots who walk away talk about the ambush, how the Messerschmitts appeared without warning, how there was no time to climb, how they could only turn and hope someone was watching their back. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. His name was James Whitmore. Born in Sheffield in 1924. His father was a toolmaker. His mother taught mathematics at the local school. James inherited both parents' precision. His father's ability to measure tolerances in thousandths of an inch, his mother's gift for seeing patterns in seemingly random data. He was quiet, not shy, but observant. The kind of boy who took engines apart to understand them, who sketched diagrams in the margins of his school books, who asked questions that made his teachers uncomfortable because the answers revealed gaps in doctrine everyone else had accepted. He enlisted in the RAF in 1941 at 17. Pilot officer training brought him to Cranwell, where he flew Tiger Moths and Harvets. His instructors noted his smoothness on the controls, his ability to feel the aircraft rather than fight it. He was fast but methodical, aggressive but calculated. By 1942, he was operational, assigned to 610 Squadron at Biggin Hill. His first operational flight was in July of that year. He flew number 4 in a formation of 4 Spitfires escorting Sterling bombers to Amiens. They saw no enemy. He fired no guns. He landed with his hands steady and his mind already dissecting the flight. What he'd done right, what he'd done wrong, how the formation could be tighter, how energy should be managed differently. By June 1943, Whitmore had flown 92 operational sorties. He had no kills. He had survived 37 combats without claiming anything to the gun camera or the witness. His squadron mates didn't know what to make of him. He didn't boast. He didn't drink much. He spent his off-duty hours in the operations room, studying combat reports from other squadrons, comparing tactics, making notes. He was 19 years old and already thinking like a tactician instead of a fighter pilot. July 15th, morning briefing at Biggin Hill. The target is a German airfield at Abbeville. 12 Spitfires will fly top cover for American B-17s inbound at 24,000 feet. The formation will orbit the target for 12 minutes while the heavies unload, then egress at best speed. Weather is poor. Cloud layers stack from 3,000 feet to 18. Visibility is marginal. The Luftwaffe response is expected. Intelligence suggests a Jägerschwader based nearby, perhaps a dozen FW-190s and Bf-109s. The squadron commander, a flight lieutenant named Davies with 16 kills and a distinguished flying cross, briefs the tactics. Maintain formation integrity. If bounced, turn hard into the enemy and call out the threat. Don't break formation to climb. The Germans want you to do that. They want you separated and low. Whitmore sits near the back. He's already doing the mental math. 12 Spitfires at 24,000 feet. 12 Messerschmitts above that. The British aircraft are faster in level flight. The Germans have the energy advantage. If they dive, the Spitfires have maybe 4 seconds before the first burst. Turn hard, and they lose altitude. Don't turn and they die. There's no good option. Only the choice between slow deaths and fast ones. Whitmore raises his hand. He asks if they've considered positioning the flight at 28,000 instead. That would give them energy to trade upward when the bounce comes. Give them options instead of just reaction. Davies listens. He nods. He tells Whitmore it's a good thought, but unlikely to matter. The bomber stream moves at 14,000 feet per minute of climb. They'd fall behind on the escort climb. Whitmore sits down. He doesn't argue. He's learned that junior pilots don't argue with flight commanders. But the question stays with him. The real issue is the Spitfire supercharger. It's a mechanical marvel, a compressor driven by gears off the engine that forces more air into the cylinders at altitude, maintaining power as the atmosphere thins. At sea level, it's unnecessary. The engine gulps air naturally. But above 15,000 feet, the supercharger cuts in and the Merlin pulls power from nothing. The problem is transitioning between supercharger speeds. There are 2 settings, low and high gear. The switch is a small lever on the left side of the cockpit. Flicking it up engages high gear. High gear is more efficient at altitude but introduces lag, a 2-second delay while the supercharger spools up. In that 2-second gap, the engine power actually drops. Climb rate diminishes. If you're being bounced and you hit the switch at the wrong moment, those 2 seconds could be fatal. Whitmore has spent hours on this problem. He's read every technical order Rolls-Royce ever issued. He's quizzed ground crews. He's flown repeated climbs at different altitudes with different supercharger settings, graphing the results in a small notebook he keeps hidden in his locker. The standard procedure is to engage high gear at 15,000 feet and never touch it again. Leave it alone. Accept the lag. Move on. But Whitmore has calculated something the manual doesn't mention. If you engage high gear at exactly the right moment, not at 15,000, but at the moment of combat, while simultaneously advancing the throttle to full military power and applying a specific pitch trim to the elevator, the lag becomes an asset instead of a liability. He hasn't tested it. It's too dangerous for peacetime training. But the math works. The morning of July 15th breaks clear over the channel. Whitmore takes off at 0930 hours. His Spitfire is number 3, flying on Flight Lieutenant Davies' right wing. Number 4 is Pilot Officer Hendricks, a veteran with 7 kills. Number 2 is Whitmore's wingman, Sergeant Tom Coventry, 19 years old, on his 4th operational flight. They climbed to 24,000 feet in formation with the bomber stream. The B-17s plod northward at 10,000 feet per minute of climb. They reached their altitude at 1,015 hours. The Sterlings are already over France, bombing something. Whitmore can't see the target. Cloud deck obscures it. He can only see the formation ahead and feel the cold, 35 degrees below zero at altitude despite the summer. They orbit for 8 minutes. Nothing. No enemy. The bombers are hitting their target. The flak is coming up. Whitmore watches it blossom below. Accurate, but ineffective at this altitude. Then the radio crackles. Bandits 12 o'clock high. Estimate 2,000 feet above. Whitmore doesn't see them at first. The sun is behind them, classic German attack position. But he sees the wink of reflected light off canopies. 8 of them, maybe 10, closing fast. Flight Lieutenant Davies' voice cuts through. Break right now. The formation fragments. Whitmore's stomach lurches as his Spitfire snaps into a hard right turn. The G-forces shove him down into his seat. His vision narrows. The sky and the sea spin. Coventry is still on his wing. Good wingman. Tight formation even in the turn. The Messerschmitts flash past. One burst. Tracers arc toward the formation. Whitmore hears the impact of rounds hitting something. Not his aircraft, but close. Hendrick's Spitfire, maybe, or one of the others in the formation. Whitmore's instinct says climb. Get altitude. Get energy. But Davies is turning, staying low, forcing the Germans to follow. It's the right tactic. Turn and make them defend. But it also means the Messerschmitts can bounce again. They do. A second bounce comes from 8 o'clock. This time Whitmore sees them. FW-190s, not Messerschmitts. 4 of them in line abreast, diving hard. The first one has guns on Davies. Tracers walk toward the flight lieutenant's canopy. Break left, Davies calls. But breaking left opens Whitmore's 6 o'clock to the second FW-190. He has maybe 3 seconds before the German is inside firing range. Coventry sees it. His Spitfire pitches up violently, offering his own nose to the threat, forcing the German to break or die. It's a perfect defensive move. It saves Whitmore's life. It costs Coventry his. The FW-190's cannon rounds catch Coventry's engine. The Merlin explodes in a shower of metal and flame. Coventry's Spitfire noses down, already falling out of control. Whitmore sees him bail out, sees the parachute billow open. 1 down. 7 Spitfires left. The fight becomes a swirling mess. 8 Spitfires and 8 German fighters, turning and climbing and diving. Nobody able to press a decisive advantage. Whitmore's hands move through muscle memory. Throttle full. Prop pitch full. Mixture rich. Flaps up. Every control input is automatic. His mind is already ahead, calculating energy states and closure rates. He's being hunted by an FW-190. The German is flying well, turning hard, staying inside his turn radius. The FW-190 is heavier, but also more powerful. In a vertical fight, the German has the advantage. In a turn fight at this altitude, they're nearly matched. Whitmore is at 28,000 feet. The FW-190 is on his right wing, 300 yards, turning hard. Whitmore pushes forward on the stick and gains a fraction. The German responds, pulling harder, black smoke pouring from his exhaust as he hits the boost. They're turning circles now, each trying to get behind the other, the fight slowly climbing. 29,000. 30,000. Whitmore's engine is working at maximum power. The Merlin is screaming. His Spitfire is doing what it does best, turning, climbing slowly, bleeding the German of energy. But the German knows it too. He banks hard left and dives away. Whitmore follows, but the FW-190 is faster in the dive. The gap opens. The German is escaping. And Whitmore understands. If the FW-190 reaches lower altitude where he can dive away, if he breaks the engagement and climbs back to regroup, then Whitmore loses. The formation is scattered. 7 Spitfires are fighting for their lives. If he can't kill this German, he can't close the fight. He can't turn it in favor of the British. He's at 28,000 feet. The supercharger is in low gear. He's already at the edge of the envelope. To engage high gear, he'd need to reach 30,000, but the German is diving and he'll never catch him at this altitude. Whitmore's hand moves to the supercharger switch. He knows what he's about to do is outside doctrine. The manuals say never engage high gear in combat. The lag will kill you. But the math in his notebook says something different. The math says if he hits the switch now, while simultaneously advancing the throttle and adjusting the pitch trim, the combined effect will overcome the lag. It's not a guess. It's calculated. But calculation isn't certainty. His thumb pushes the switch up. For 2 seconds, nothing. The engine coughs. Power drops. The Merlin sounds sick. The climb rate bleeds off. Whitmore feels it. The aircraft suddenly heavier, less responsive. The German is pulling away. The angle is wrong. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Then the supercharger winds up. High gear engages. The Merlin's roar changes pitch. The entire engine note rises an octave. Power floods back. Not gradually, but instantly. The throttle is already at full military. The pitch trim is already optimized. The supercharger engages and the engine suddenly has 20% more power than it had seconds before. The Spitfire's nose snaps up. The climb is violent. The G-forces press Whitmore down into his seat. His vision grays. He tightens his stomach muscles and grunts against the pressure. The altimeter needle spins upward. 30,000. 31. 32. The FW-190 is ahead and below now. The German pilot sees what's happening. A Spitfire climbing vertically, climbing faster than any fighter should be able to climb at 30,000 feet. He's shocked. He looks up, and there's a British fighter above him. The German tries to dive. Too late. Whitmore's closure rate is 300 yards per minute. The gap closes. 200 yards. 100. Whitmore's thumb comes off the firing button, and he's already applying back pressure on the stick, lining up the sight. At 50 yards, he presses the button. The 8.303 caliber machine guns pour 3 seconds of fire into the FW-190. The German's port wing explodes. The fighter tumbles. Whitmore sees him bail out. 1 kill. His first. But there's no time to celebrate. The other Germans have seen his climb. They've seen that the Spitfire can do something they thought was impossible. And they're coming for him. Whitmore breaks off and dives for safety. His altitude advantage is gone, but his speed is good. He accelerates downward, away from the fight, toward the cloud deck below. Enemy tracers follow. None connect. He levels off at 8,000 feet and heads for home, nursing his Spitfire back across the channel. The engine temperature is running hot. He's pushed the Merlin beyond limits. The airframe is vibrating. There's a hole in the fuselage, cannon round through the tail section, but the controls respond. He's flying at home. He lands at Biggin Hill at 1,145 hours. Ground crew runs to help him out of the cockpit. His flying suit is soaked. His hands are shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline and the physical toll of sustained G-forces in combat. The debriefing room smells like cigarette smoke and fear. 7 pilots are alive. Coventry's parachute was seen. The intelligence officer notes it. 1 pilot down, probably captured or prisoner. They'll confirm later. Flight Lieutenant Davies listens to each pilot's account. When it's Whitmore's turn, the 19-year-old describes the engagement clinically. The bounce from 8 o'clock. The engagement with the FW-190. The climb. The kill. Davies leans forward. You climbed away from him at 30,000 feet. Yes, sir. Engaged high supercharger gear and pushed full military power. That's a lag maneuver, Davies says. You risked the engine stalling. Not if you've calculated the throttle advance and pitch trim correctly, sir. Davies studies Whitmore for a long moment. Then he nods. He tells the intelligence officer to note it. High-altitude supercharger engagement during combat resulted in positive outcome. Word travels. Within 2 days, the group captain wants to see Whitmore. The meeting is formal, intimidating. The group captain sits behind a polished desk in a spotless office. A test pilot from the Air Fighting Development Unit is there, a squadron leader named Blackwell. Whitmore explains the technique again. Blackwell listens without interrupting. When Whitmore finishes, Blackwell asks a series of precise questions. Engine performance curves. Supercharger dynamics. The exact timing of the switch engagement relative to throttle advancement. Whitmore answers each one. He's prepared for this. He's lived with these numbers for months. Blackwell tells him it's interesting. Dangerous, but interesting. They want him to demonstrate it under controlled conditions. High altitude, chase plane, camera recording. If it works reliably, they'll evaluate it. If it fails, they'll bury the idea. The test flight is scheduled for July 28th. The morning is clear and cold. Whitmore takes off in a Spitfire with a camera gun mounted in the wing. A second Spitfire, piloted by a test pilot named Richards, flies chase at 500 feet above and behind. Whitmore climbs to 28,000 feet. He radios Richards. Richards confirms. Whitmore reduces throttle, engages low supercharger gear, and holds the climb at a steady angle. The altimeter shows 28,000, holding steady. Then he pushes forward on the stick, pulls back on the throttle lever, fully advancing it to military power, reaches for the supercharger switch, and hits it. The climb is immediate. The nose pitches up. The Merlin roars. The airframe shudders with the effort. The altimeter needle begins spinning upward again. 29,000. 30. 31. The turn-in bank indicator shows a 4-degree bank as the aircraft reaches maximum climb angle. Richard's voice crackles. Climb rate looks clean. Estimate 800 feet per minute at 30,000. That's what Whitmore calculated. That's what the math predicted. The climb that should be impossible is real. Whitmore levels off at 35,000 feet. He repeats the maneuver twice more. Same result each time. The supercharger engagement, despite its built-in lag, produces an immediate climb response when timed correctly with throttle advancement and trim. He lands after 40 minutes. The test is conclusive. The Air Fighting Development Unit issues guidance within 1 week. They don't call it Whitmore's climb. They call it the High-Altitude Supercharger Engagement Protocol. They don't mention his name, just a reference to a field procedure developed during operational flying. The guidance goes to every Spitfire squadron in the RAF. It's incorporated into combat training. Squadron leaders brief their pilots. Experienced pilots test it at altitude with newer pilots in chase. The response is immediate. Within 3 weeks, pilots report using it in combat. A pilot from 111 Squadron uses it to escape 4 FW-190s by climbing above them, then diving to kill one before the others regroup. A pilot from 485 Squadron, a New Zealand unit, uses it to close on a Messerschmitt that was escaping. A pilot from 452 Squadron uses it 3 times in a single mission over France. The statistical impact is measurable. Combat loss rates among Spitfire squadrons drop by 7% over the following month. It's a small number, but in a war measured in lives, 7% is significant. German intelligence begins reporting it. Captured pilots mention American fighters climbing vertically from 30,000 feet. German pilots begin adjusting tactics. Instead of diving away, they start turning into the Spitfire, forcing an engagement at altitude where both fighters have similar performance. But that's fine. That's still better than the previous tactic, which was to dive and escape. Now the German has to fight. The British has options. Whitmore himself uses the technique 3 more times before the war ends. Once in September 1943 over Belgium. Once in February 1944 over the Seine. Once in April 1944 over Germany. He's credited with 7 confirmed kills by the war's end. Not a big number. Not the ace status some pilots achieve, but respectable for a quiet, methodical 19-year-old who never set out to be famous. He survives the war. He returns to Sheffield in June 1945. He doesn't talk about combat. He goes back to his father's toolmaking shop. He works as a precision machinist, the same job he's been training for since childhood. He marries in 1947. He has 2 children. He lives quietly until he dies in 1987 at age 63. His obituary mentions his service. It does not mention the climb. It does not mention the technique that saved 8 pilots on July 15, 1943. It does not mention that his name appears in RAF training manuals for 30 years as the discoverer of a procedure that became standard doctrine. But the pilots know. The ones who flew Spitfires. The ones who trained on them. The ones who teach the history. They know that a 19-year-old mechanic's son from Sheffield did the math nobody else bothered to do. They know he tested it. They know he proved it. They know it saved lives. The high-altitude supercharger engagement technique survived the RAF far longer than anyone expected. It became standard procedure for all Spitfire variants. It was refined and adapted as new marks came into service. The principle that lag in a mechanical system can be overcome through correct timing and throttle management became foundational in fighter tactics. Post-war, test pilots at Farnborough cited the Spitfire procedure when developing recovery techniques for early jet fighters. The principle of managing power transitions during critical flight regimes influenced how pilots were taught to handle the Rolls-Royce Avon and de Havilland Ghost engines. The technique itself appeared in historical notes, always without fanfare, always buried in technical appendices. Field procedure developed during operational service, 1943. High-altitude climb technique. Supercharger engagement at full throttle. See Technical Order 3-1-3B. Nobody reading that technical order would know it came from a 19-year-old pilot's careful observation and mathematical calculation. Aviation history is built on moments like this. Not grand strategies or billion-pound programs, but individuals who notice what others miss. Who calculate carefully. Who test assumptions. Who risk themselves to verify intuition. James Whitmore didn't redesign the Spitfire. He didn't invent aerodynamics. He simply understood the Merlin engine's characteristics better than anyone else. He did the math. He trusted it. He proved it in combat. The Spitfire went on to become the most iconic fighter of the war. Pilots loved it and cursed it in equal measure. It was fast, responsive, beautiful, and unforgiving. But after July 1943, it was a little less limited at the edge of its performance envelope. There is a photograph of James Whitmore, taken in 1944. He stands beside a Spitfire, parachute harness slung over his shoulder, the fuselage marked with 7 tiny swastikas, his confirmed kills. He looks young, impossibly young, but his eyes are focused, measuring something beyond the camera's frame. He's thinking, always thinking. He never wrote a memoir. He left no letters philosophizing about innovation or courage. He simply flew, calculated, and moved on to the next problem. His legacy is a procedure buried in training manuals, a footnote in a technical order, a single mention in a squadron intelligence report dated July 15, 1943. Pilot Officer J. Whitmore demonstrated high-altitude climb procedure. Aircraft recovered without incident. Technique recommended for evaluation. It's one line, no elaboration. But it marks the moment when one pilot's curiosity turned a mechanical limitation into tactical advantage. And when the world spins hard at altitude and the engine roars and the enemy is above you and below you, somewhere in the mathematics of supercharger timing and throttle management and pitch trim adjustment, James Whitmore's quiet precision still saves lives. Sometimes the difference between survival and catastrophe is understanding your machine so completely that you know it better than its designers do. And sometimes the person who finds that understanding doesn't need anyone to say it out loud. They already know what they've done. The Spitfire is gone now except in museums and air shows. But the lesson remains. Trust the physics. Understand your engine. Calculate precisely. And when everyone says something is impossible, sometimes the answer is just doing the math a little more carefully than anyone else. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.